let's get this shit show on the road, folks.
Sounds good. You're kind of far away from the mic.
Yes, that's because I am far away from the mic.
Oh.
You know, it's kind of sad. The amount of things that I would rather be doing than podcasting on Sunday nights has grown exponentially. You know, over I guess that's why I didn't do anything for almost a month. You know, but since I overslept, you know, I meant to warm up the room a little bit more, you know, but our guest is already here.
Who's our guest?
Hang on, I just want to make sure that I get his project correctly.
By the way, did my phone call wake you up?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, I needed to be woken up because I was sleeping through when I was supposed to be, you know, getting this shit going, right?
Yep.
So our guest at this time is Thomas J. Weiss, who's looking to get something called the Conservatarian Press off the ground. Has written, edited anthologies in the adventure, horror, mystery, and military genres.
Based.
And editor-in-chief of Sonder magazine. Did I miss anything, Thomas?
Except the part where I've edited anthologies. I've edited, to this point, the magazine, which has had one issue out, and 2 books, one of which is out, came out last year, called Kill Sequence, and another one that's coming out in a few weeks.
Okay. I thought I mentioned anthologies, but so
I can barely hear you, by the way. Is that just me, or is that?
Yeah, I can't hear you either.
Okay.
Really? Okay. What about now?
Slightly better.
Okay, I know what I need to do. Sorry, guys. One second. I'll come back in.
All right.
How does my voice sound? Am I okay?
Yeah, you're okay. It was echoing a little bit, but I think that was actually coming from his end, so he must be doing something that I'm not really
okay.
sure.
No worries.
Yeah.
What about now?
That's a little better, I think.
Okay. So, Thomas, you mentioned that you wanted to talk to us, and so I thought, well, maybe the best place to do it would be here, where there's a document of it. And I mean, because you can't, you know, there's a lot of people you can't trust, you know, right now with all this shit going on. So maybe you may have more questions for me than I have for you. But before we, you know, get to the meat, you know, and potatoes, you know, what is the Conservatarian Press? What is your goal? Looking on your Twitter, I see mention of Paul Ryan and talk about the Chinese balloon and whatnot. I mean, I don't know what are you looking to accomplish?
Yeah, so Conservatarian Press kind of grew out of what was many years ago a site called Liberty Island and Liberty Island Magazine. It was started up by 2 gentlemen who were veterans of the New York book publishing scene, and they were kind of early money on the progressive takeover of fiction and basically all things culture, and wanted a place for, you know, conservative and libertarian authors where they could publish stories and not have to worry about the sort of politics and the premises of those stories could be did not have to toe kind of the progressive line and that sort of thing. So I wrote for Liberty Island for many years. I submitted a screenplay to them that was published, and I wrote, kind of small pieces of cultural commentary and that sort of thing for them for many years until I joined as an editor right around 2020, I believe. And then we started, to re-energize. At least the intention was to re-energize the website and the book publishing side of it. We had published a certain number of books in the years between roughly 2014 and 2020. We were looking to energize that a little bit, and so we went out and started looking for more titles and more authors, and eventually, there's a whole backstory to what happened with Liberty Island, but that the site went under in late 2021, and Conservatarian Press kind of grew out of that. So, you can go to our website, conservatarianpress.com. Our proprietor, Jamie Wilson, has a very good kind of our story or the background of why we exist, right? And it's to make conservative and libertarian voices a normal thing in mainstream fiction, right? You look at pretty much anything that you see on or read today, and it has either at its core or in the margins a kind of progressive sentiment or a progressive sensibility, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we were trying to sort of bring to light with the Tom Montilion thing, and what it kind of unveiled. I mean, everyone already knew it, but maybe people had been kind of on the sidelines and they didn't know just how much reading you would get with saying very, I guess, normie tier stuff. And so I guess you all, I haven't really been familiar with Conservatarian, but it sounds like you all kind of knew that early on and you wanted to space away from it.
Yeah. So the hints of it, you can see it everywhere in popular culture. One of my when I got 2009, 2010 time frame, I'm ex-military. I was hurt in Iraq, and I was doing rehab back in San Antonio, and I got started watching this great new show that came out called The Big Bang Theory, right? One of the most popular sitcoms of all time. And in subtle ways, big and small, to include, having the main character Penny wearing a Hillary for President T-shirt, they let us know that their sensibilities were progressive, and that you can find little hints of that in what the protagonists, what bumper stickers are on the protagonist's wall in a movie or a TV show, right? They got a Bernie Sanders sticker, an Obama sticker on the wall. That's never on the wall of the antagonist, right? You never see a Bush Cheney sticker on the wall of a protagonist or the sympathetic character in any story. Mm-hmm. I was just watching the new show called Poker Face. Have you guys heard about this?
No.
New show? Yeah. I didn't know until after I started to do some research on it that it was Rian Johnson who produced this thing, and I've refused to watch anything by him after he destroyed Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. But
I thought you meant Greg Johnson for a second. Okay.
Yeah. No, Rian Johnson. Anyway, the TV show Poker Face, it's a mildly interesting sort of Murder, She Wrote premise where the main character has a superpower, more or less, of being able to tell when somebody's lying, and she uses that to solve murders that occur around her. And I think it was the second or third episode, she's driving through Texas, and here's this, what is obviously a conservative commentator, or what is obviously intended to be portrayed as a conservative commentator on the radio, sort of a Rush Limbaugh type, except he's not saying anything Rush Limbaugh would actually say. He's saying these wild, weird things that, and race. She calls him a fascist and that sort of thing. But it's a complete bastardization of it's what I imagine. Somebody who is had no life experience other than a degree from Evergreen State or something. That's what they think of as a conservative, the mainstream conservative ideals, those sorts of things. So and that was the subtext. Those sort of things are the subtext to the shows, or if they're not the outright premise of the shows, and that is conservatives, libertarians bad, right, and progressives good. And so that's the sort of overall oeuvre, I guess you would say, of what we're trying to do at Conservatarian Press. So my bona fides up front, or my biases up front, I guess you would say, is I'm a libertarian, conservative leaning libertarian, I would say, in the sense that socially I lean more to the left and to some progressive positions, in the sense that I really don't care between two consenting adults, or even in the sense of, I want freedom, kind of maximizing freedom, which is, the more I've researched Tom Monteleone, that's his kind of baseline desire, and his baseline understanding as well, is that, there's a great quote from American Spectator did an interview or a piece on him about 10 years ago. And he has a great quote in there where he says something to the effect of, besides losing a child, the only thing that really scares him is to lose freedom of expression, to lose individuality and autonomy. Those are the types of things he cares about deeply. And they're the kind of things I do as well. So those are my biases. And in that sense, I tend to lean politically in this day and age over more on the right side of the spectrum, because that's where, for better or worse, individuality and personal freedom reside today. And this whole episode, I think, marks, kind of illustrates that point. So, if you're on the left side or progressive side of the political spectrum, you have to march in lockstep to whatever the, opinion of the day is. And in the last week or so, it's been the opinion that Tom Monteleone is a racist who does not deserve to be involved in polite conversation with anybody. So that's the sort of thing I'm objecting to. And on Twitter, I've gone through, with a couple of people have been trying to convince me that what he said about George Floyd, and about the I'm going to blank on her name, the award winner at the
I've
the winner of
literally
that
already
award.
forgotten.
Carol Clover, maybe.
Yeah, that he called a fat black chick.
If that's the worst thing that was said about her, I mean, we all got called names in grade school, and we made it out. Most of us made it out okay. I don't know if she caught some shrapnel or what, but I mean, if that's the worst thing that was leveled at her, I mean, I think she'll be okay.
Well, look, it's obviously disrespectful, and it was intended to be. And he has a point of view, and that he. But from my perspective, the important part of that whole story was not that he said the word fat black, this phrase fat black chick, because the only part of it that was not germane to the story that he told was the fat part. Like, that was a gratuitous swipe at her. He didn't need to take. But
yeah, it wasn't substantial.
Yeah,
it wasn't a substantial descriptor. I mean,
but the black part of it was, because she went on to recite the
Stoker's so
poem,
white.
Yeah, about being so white, right? So he's reacting to that, and reacting to the the irony of that. I don't think in any racist way. It was just a descriptive way, in other words. So and he's making, this is the other thing that I argued on Twitter, is that he is making what for years has been called the soft bigotry of low expectations defense, right? So, and that's affirmative action proponents, for as long as I've been alive, have been saying we have to do, we have to lift up marginalized folks, and we have to give them more opportunities because of the opportunities that they've been denied through, obvious and egregious racism in the past. And while there's a lot of merit to that argument, the counter argument is that you make those people who are lifted up into, you then question in everyone's mind. And this, I think this is a legitimate question that everybody has, whether they admit it or not. You make the question in everyone's mind as to whether or not they deserve to be there, or whether they would be there if objective standards were in place, right? So you have this Supreme Court case that's being deliberated right now, that between Harvard and the University of North Carolina, where they're being sued by Asian students, not white students. They're being sued by Asian students, who are a collection of Asian students who have been denied access to those institutions because they're too successful, right? They're too successful on placement tests, on the ACT, on the SAT, in comparison to their white, Hispanic, Black peers. And they're not being led into those organizations, not being led into Harvard and other universities on the basis of their merit, or, put it another way, if they were only to be let in on the basis of objective ideals of merit, then they would be admitted to Harvard and UNC in far more numbers than they have been. And Harvard and UNC have argued that they made the argument in front of the Supreme Court that they need to be able to include race into that discussion in order to balance that scales for the purposes of diversity and for purposes of inclusivity and that sort of thing. So, so the question becomes, even to those students who are admitted, I'm sure they're happy to get into Harvard, and I'm sure that they're that their lives are going to be they're going to have a great benefit from that. But the question, even in their minds, is going to be, did I get in because I'm Black, right? Or did I get in for any sort of merit that I have? And that's the sort of thing that Tom, that's sort of argument that I heard Tom making. When he talks about, did you write while being a woman? Well, then you get an award. You write while Indian, that sort of thing. So he's making the argument that once you include that sort of thing into the discussion, it no longer becomes about merit. It no longer becomes, hey, you've got the best story, or you've written this incredible novel. And for better or worse, that award winner, and like I said, I'm not familiar with her or her work. She could have written the best novel imaginable and gotten the award, and you'd still be able to, in the back of your mind, in the back of everybody's mind, there would be that question, is it really that way?
From what I recall, her most popular, her most notorious contribution to horror was coining the term "final girl," which we all.
That's right. Yeah.
So she didn't spend a lifetime in the horror genre plugging away, year after year the way Tom did. And that was his point, is that he made his bones, as he said on the show, and she had not. In fact, she got it early. She got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and her lifetime is probably not even halfway, or it's probably like a quarter, in not even halfway. And the whole point of a Lifetime Achievement Award is that you give a lifetime of service, of working hard, and coining the term "final girl" is not enough, and being Black is not enough to do. That was his point. And I don't see anything worth apologizing for over that, whether he threw us under the bus or not. I still see nothing. I listened back to that whole show, and I still see nothing in it that I haven't heard some variation of on someone else's channel currently on YouTube. with all these crazy new policy guidelines now, I still hear much worse things from what I listen to on YouTube right now, today. So I don't, these people just don't know how to run a real podcast, that isn't all stuffy and pretentious and boring. Like,
Exactly. They should go listen to Revenge of the Sith or some actual
yeah,
far right things if they think that was, crazy. And gosh.
Well, listen, the point. So, so you think Tom's wrong, okay? So you that's your point of view. You think he's wrong, and maybe even think he's an asshole for saying it. That's come up with a counter argument. Persuade people that he is wrong. You can't. In my opinion, the worst thing you can do is say you're no longer a person that we need to talk to or look at or or read anymore, right? So the Stephen King, the horror writer Stephen King, a couple of weeks ago tweeted in the context of the whole dust up over Florida and taking sexually. I mean, depending on what side of the aisle you're in, whether it's books that should not be banned or books that contain some sort of explicit sexual imagery that should not be shown to 5-year-olds. He said, I just pulled up the tweet. He said, "Hey kids, it's your old buddy Steve King telling you if they ban a book in your school, haul your ass to the nearest bookstore or library ASAP and find out what they don't want you to read." Right? Which is
They'll say that until it's something like Mein Kampf.
Well,
out there.
So, and it's a sentiment I agree with, even something like Mein Kampf, right? But it also works with people and with ideas. So if the Hoarder Writers Association is banning Tom Monteleone for all intents and purposes, Steve King should be tweeting, hey, if they don't want you to know what he says, you should be running to the nearest, YouTube podcast or the nearest bookstore to find out what he's saying.
I've got to point this out with the rack. I agree with what you're saying. I disagree with you on the fact that we're going to get anywhere by pointing out this hypocrisy. I think they're much more evil than you're giving them credit for. They know what they're doing. And you're exactly right. They're not going to say, okay, now Tom Monteleone is bad. Go read his books. Yeah. No, they have a specific agenda and specific things that they want to unperson, such as someone like Tom. While promoting, they'll only promote the most degenerate things imaginable. They'll say, okay, that's banned. You should go read that. But then they'll act like we need to, put all this other stuff under the rug. It's very deliberate, is basically what I'm saying.
I hear that argument, and I'm not convinced. I'm not, in some cases, perhaps there's a point to be made that they're actually acting in bad faith, and they really want to harm the other side or whatever. But I don't, for the vast majority of the people I think involved in this debate, I think it's a product of a couple of things. Like the social media obviously hasn't helped. People are in their own bubble and can be very, very quickly insulated in that bubble to only hear the things that they want to hear. The left for a long time has been following a version of Herbert Marcuse's tolerant intolerance, or no, I'm screwing that thing up. What is it? Repressive tolerance. There you go. Are you guys familiar with this essay?
No.
So he wrote, it's the most fascinating thing to read 50 years later, because it's an argument he wrote in 1965, or a piece he wrote in 1965, that essentially argues for the fact that in a majority kind of rules society or democracy like this, that there is no opportunity for the left to gain a voice, right? So there's always going to be this sort of fascist undercurrent that the left is always fighting. They're the good guys. And that the only way, and that will eventually lead in a democracy to a place where intolerance reigns, right? Because if the majority rules, then the left will never have a voice, and that sort of intolerance multiple reigns. And I'm butchering his argument because I'm kind of doing it off the top of my head. But there was a passage in, he wrote an update to it a couple of years later, and there's a passage in it that says the left has no equal voice, no equal access to mass media and their public facilities, not because a conspiracy excludes it, but because in good old capitalist fashion, it does not have the required purchasing power. And the left does not have the purchasing power because it is the left. Now, reading those words today is just stunning because it's an absolute inversion of what's actually going on, right? I mean, the left is, they are the power, the progressives are the most powerful voice in media, mass media, culture, and that's kind of evidenced by this fact that they can, boot Tom Monteleone from the Horror Writers Association for what he said on your podcast, and that's, it's so the left is no longer the left, in other words, in Marcuse's formalization. But they still try to do the whole repressive tolerance thing. In other words, they try to silence voices that they disagree with because they think that they will ultimately lead to fascism, right? Even somebody like, a libertarian like me or Tom, who wants everybody, I'm a free speech absolutist in the sense that I want everybody to have a voice, right? That's not repressive in any sort of way, but that sort of thinking is not something that they want to hear, because if there's some form of insecurity in that in my mind, and then they might think that they, if they allow opposing voices, if they allow opposing arguments, if they allow somebody to come on and say that George Floyd was a drug addicted thug, which by all indications he probably was, then that somehow they can't let anybody hear that, because it kind of it provides a little bit of nuance, or it muddies the waters in terms of what Tom described as his canonization. You know what I mean? So they have a story, they want to tell it a certain way. Anybody that comes in with any sort of dissenting opinions, they have to be silenced, because they're the good. They're on the right side of history. They're the good people. They're the ones who say, we know what's better for everybody else. So that's the sort of thing, as a libertarian, that's the sort of thing that I object to. I don't believe that either side, left or right, should ultimately emerge victorious from this, political battle. I think the left needs the right and the right needs the left. And we need to have this sort of, we need to have an open and honest debate, both about what each side wants and what each side, in order to do that, you kind of have to be able to describe the other side's position, and you kind of have to understand what they're really talking about and what they really want.
Empathy, right?
So, yeah, I feel like I've been talking for a very long time, and you guys haven't interrupted me. So please go
ahead. You mean empathy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Empathy. So.
Yeah, that's a tough one at this time. See, I have this endless cycle that I keep repeating, where I spend years acting in good faith, and still, they're up my ass, with whatever I'm doing, and then something finally.
So this might be a good transition for me to ask you guys some questions, like how you came to be, and how this podcast came to be, and how you were able to get a legend like Tom to come on. How do you know him, that sort of thing? Just tell me your story.
Well, here's the thing, is that it's amazing and even a little bit humbling that I've been able to rankle the ire of this many people when I'm just a cashier in the food service industry. And all these people that I've looked up to, most of my adult life, and some in my, since childhood, can turn on me, who's really just a reader, that podcasts every now and then, that have been able to draw this much attention, negative or otherwise. It's really weird to see so many writers who I held in high regard treat me as just a disposable napkin, or beneath contempt. When again, I'm just a reader, and I've spent 10 plus years promoting so many people's work, just for them to turn on me, when either they disagree with me so strongly, or they're afraid to be associated with me. And I've learned that most authors are just cowards, or they don't know how to make good radio, so to speak. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. Most writers, I mean, heck, I'm a writer, but I would not want to hang around other writers. It's just a fact.
But as for how this all started, you know, not much has changed. I've been a cashier in the food service industry this entire time since I started. I started as an editor for Surreal Grotesque magazine, which was an online, magazine with really killer art, uh, that accompanied really bizarre and sometimes gory stories by some of these authors. And I just kind of lucked out in contacting so many of those back then. I was the vice president of a local writers guild. Um, you know, only, verbally. There was no charter for that organization, nothing like that, but I did that for a while. And
You're in Tennessee, right?
yes, but that's where I got to shed any, negativity about speaking publicly. I came to relish, having any kind of audience, whether it was 5 people or, over a dozen or 20. Um, so yes, we're gonna have Hart Fisher on sometime, Carrie, and I just got to figure out how to get in touch with him. But so from Surreal Grotesque, when I saw how well that worked out as the editor of that co-editor of that magazine, from there I decided to help Daniel Gonzalez on his Surreal Grotesque podcast, and he eventually got tired of showing up to it and said, "Here, I'll just hand it off to you," and I did for a while. Took that as far as I could, and then decided to shift it over to something, a new podcast where it was just me and my vision, not piggybacking off of Surreal Grotesque. I called it Surreal Sermons, and basically spent a year chasing down every Bizarro author I could possibly find. Now, are you familiar with Bizarro? How
A little
familiar?
bit, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was obsessed with Bizarro during this time, and I made it kind of like the main discussion of Surreal Sermons. And I think that it kind of gave these people an exaggerated sense of themselves. Maybe I'm responsible for that part of it, but because I really did, respect them, and I wanted to be one of them, so much that I went out to Portland and hung out with them and partied with them, and then I get back, and a year later they lose their minds, and I see their dark sides when Trump is on the campaign trail, or he's elected, or they're coining all these ridiculous nonsense new terms that have nothing to do with some dude on the East Coast in the South, who none of this stuff applies to his, you know, active living situation here or outside of here. Like, I can see no evidence of anything of these things they're talking about. I'm just a sheltered, all my life insulated, little mama's boy who had a dream, and they're saying all these things about how,
Okay, Martin Luther King.
gender is not a thing, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, I had a dream. Yes, but no, I would consider. I would. When the temperature of the room is, good enough, I can be moderate, but if they're going to go to extremes, then I'll go to my corner and be extreme too. But one thing I have learned, because after Surreal Sermons broke down and I kind of got burned out after seeing, their true political faces and whatnot, I started to get disquieted by how boldly they were to not allowing conservatives a voice. And then from that, Kevin Strange said, "You really need to still be podcasting," and he gave me a voice on his website where he hosted my insanity, where I leaned in a little too far against these people and started calling them out, to a harsh degree. I did and said some things and exaggerated other things, all in order to get under their skin, and it worked. I think the highest view listening I ever got on The Quiet Place initially on Strange's website was like 25,000 listeners.
Okay.
So
That's not nothing.
yeah, and eventually Strange said, "You're too big. You're too big for this avenue. You need to go over to YouTube and move The Quiet Place over there." And maybe he was relieved to get me off his side. I don't know, because I did go too far sometimes, even for him. But
did you admit that at the time? Like, was it a tongue in cheek sort of going too far, or was it a?
I didn't care.
You
I
knew
just
yourself you were doing it for the shock value, that sort of thing.
I think I think I did know, but I didn't care. I just wanted to outrage them so much. But I spent the last 100 episodes, I believe, apologizing and hoping they would hear. See, so and my constantly be talked down by my two co-hosts who are no longer here. And another co-host too who's no longer here. From last year, she would constantly talk me down and say, "No, just don't talk about it. Stop apologizing." Blah blah blah. And maybe they meant well in my best interests, just to stop, making it an issue and to make things better for myself. But I wanted to get it out, and it doesn't matter if you apologize to these people, I mean, if you stop apologizing, they don't care, is what I heard on Revenge of the Sis one several times. And it's true, it doesn't. They don't, because they'll move the goalpost. So that's where I am now. I'm 160 episodes into The Quiet Place, and it's gone through several phases as well, different lineups and whatnot, different seasons. But I hope that answers. I hope that charts the
Yeah. What about you, Zach?
Zach.
Well, so I'm the token, sort of extremely religious, way more further right one of the group, but it wasn't always that way. Not that that's a bad thing, but when Jeremy was talking about his little first iteration, you see that this kind of went on, and I think it was around 2016. It really started with the whole Trump thing. That was like my first year in undergrad. And so I was really getting exposed to a lot more, and I was writing a lot. I was writing and getting published. And around this time, I really was kind of in a similar boat with Jeremy, as in I loved Bizarro. I loved horror. I was writing Bizarro and horror and did end up getting published. I had a book published by Bizarro Pulp Press, which was one of the Bizarro outfits. Not necessarily the biggest one, but a pretty good one. And I had several horror novels published back then. But being
Are you
around
self-published or by a press?
By presses. I'm self-published now because, for obvious reasons, like a publisher would not touch me with a 10-foot pole now. But back then
you did hear the whole discussion about what we do for a living at Conservatarian Press? Did you?
Oh yeah, I'll definitely reach out to y'all. I'm always writing. So, but anyway, around this time, you see, I was around a lot of writers in that time. I was in college. I was in like an honors thing for the arts. So I was around all kinds of weird artsy people, and I never really fit in the sense that I was more conservative. Now, at this point in time, I wasn't necessarily religious. I would just say that I was normal, and I didn't buy the insane lefty stuff. Like, even back then, I did not buy into the tranny stuff and all of that. Like I thought it was nonsense, but I really never spoke up about it because I didn't want to cause a stir. And it was really after Kevin Strange started his thing, and then Jeremy started the Quiet Place, that it was kind of cool seeing this conservative thing echo in the arts. And so that's kind of how I just started, talking to Jeremy back then. I know I gave him some of my books, if I remember correctly. I don't remember how it exactly happened, but
So you didn't grow up religious? Your parents weren't religious at all?
No, they weren't. I converted.
How did you find it? Like, was there a religious pill moment for you?
Yeah, there was, in a very weird, unlikely way. Like, I had a girlfriend who I'm very sorry to say that, we basically lived as man and wife, but not married. So there's a lot of fornicating going on in the dorms, but
scandalous.
Yeah, but see, her family was religious, and they would, every time I would go over to her house, they would take me to church with them, but I never really cared about it. And basically, I was reading a lot of philosophy at the time, and this kind of happened on the Quiet Place, which is a really weird thing. Like, I converted while I was, a member of the Quiet Place, but I was reading Thomas Ligotti and his like really dark anti-natalist philosophy. I saw that it was kind of true in the sense that it was logical, but I also it kind of opened a dichotomy in my mind where you can either be atheistic to this level where it's like, okay, the best option is suicide, which he makes the case for, or things actually matter and you're a Christian. And I mean, I still believe that the dichotomy firmly exists. And I kind of, one of the philosophical problems I was like wrestling in my head with there, a sermon from that church that they had dragged me to kind of answered it for me. And so I actually became a Christian because of that, and then, got baptized there. I mean, I'm no longer in that denomination, but I mean, I'll always, of course, thank that pastor and that denomination for baptizing me and all that.
Have you listened to Jordan Peterson at all?
Yes.
Either one of you?
I've read his book and listened to some of his stuff. I'm not really a fan of Peterson for a couple reasons that I won't really get into. I mean, unless you want to. But I have. I've read him. I'm not really a fan, but not for the reason you think. He's not like too extreme or something for me. It's a little bit different than that.
Yeah. So the reason I asked was I was kind of thinking about my own religious journey, in the sense, like, I was brought up Catholic. I went to Catholic schools for, the first 9 years of my life, and then went to a Catholic college. Actually went to a Jesuit college and grad school, as a matter of fact. Although the Jesuit part of it didn't really play into the grad school, but I knew from a very late age that I was kind of, not really believing of all of this stuff, and didn't really quite understand it in the way that they were explaining it to me. And then, listening to, I was kind of early money on the Jordan Peterson train, in the sense of when I started listening to his explanations of, from Maps of Meaning and the lectures that he did on YouTube. I get a better sense of what religion actually is, at least from my perspective, and that's the sense of a collective body of people just trying to figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah, see, that's kind of the reason I dislike Peterson, because he's really just a Gnostic, like capital G Gnostic, Jungian type. And other than that, I also believe that he's kind of meant to like satiate the right, as in he's put up as like the most extreme, or the most as far as you can go. And so I think he's meant to kind of stifle the right from actually moving.
I don't get that. I don't get that suggestion at all. He's really the most inoffensive, again, mild, old man just trying to, gently guide, young minds in a way that is unconventional. I mean, when I saw people going after him, and him standing on top of a bench, just to be heard, he says, they want you to be quiet. They want you to walk away. But that way why you absolutely can't. I mean, it was like a scene in a movie. I'm surprised there wasn't a swelling orchestra playing or something, But
yeah,
it was
when it comes back to the religion thing, I mean, he really is. He's pushing Gnosticism. That's what I can't stand about him, because he's leading people away from Christ and to basically this kind of like macho red pill religion where it's all about like
But he didn't
read
create
through 12 rules for life. Everything is like, it goes back to this.
But
And
he didn't
even
create this red pill religion. I mean, it's just he kind of got lumped in with it. And what was it? What was the other thing he was that he was associated with? The intellectual dark web. And I don't even know who the
Yeah.
other people were in that. But the point is I mean,
Joe Rogan was in there. Brett Weinstein was in there.
Brett Weinstein, he's another guy that got unjustly just harangued.
heard him.
Yeah, just absolutely.
Well, he was the canary in the coal mine, right? Because he's this leftist professor of Evergreen State who objected to a fairly inoffensive thing of the radical leftists on his campus were trying to keep white people out from campus on a specific day, and he said no, I will have my class going as possible, as normal. And they called him a racist and hounded him off of campus. So it's and at the time, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of people thought, well, that's just campus. Like, it's not that won't translate to the real world. But the people who were canceling Brett Weinstein were, they grew up, they got jobs, and now they're in the corporate workplace in places like Google and Twitter and elsewhere, and maybe even in the Horror Writers Association, where they're now saying, Tom, somebody who doesn't hold our views can't be a part of it. So,
no,
what is it about Evergreen? It's like it's always this one college, and it's like that college is the canary in the coal mine. It's like what happens there is what will happen to the rest of the country in like 5 months.
I do want to say that the people that that engaged you or you engaged them on Twitter and ran away crying, I guess, when you didn't go all in and kiss their asses. Yeah,
I did notice that. I expected Jeff Burt to be a little bit more angry in that like dispute, but he was really tame and, like you said, kind of just left it. Which, I mean, you can leave a thread. There's nothing wrong with that, and it probably saves us some brain cells, and it was a good thing. But I didn't expect it.
He mentioned just let them scream into the void, and my response to that is, if this is the void, there's a lot more sanity in it nowadays. There's a lot more sane people occupying it nowadays. Exactly. Because the response I've gotten has, I mean, over there on their side, it may look like I'm the devil himself or Christ himself. I don't know how they think these days, because they're no longer joking about, Satan or whatever. But the point is, I'm getting largely a positive response over here. It's just they're having to do it behind closed doors because they're afraid. They're so terrified, literally, of losing what little ground they have in whatever they have accrued, or earned in the writing, the publishing industry or whatever. So I mean, there's a lot of people speaking up, just not in the way that they're so prone to do, where they're encouraged to out in the open, and it's okay. But these people, they have to go behind closed doors and congratulate me or high five me. But somebody said, somebody confided in me that when they voiced their opposition to the HWA and to disagree with what they were doing in punishing Tom and taking his award and whatnot, their response was, well, we know who not to accept into the Borderlands anthology. or not the Borderlands, but we know who not to accept, submissions from in the future.
Well, and this is so, and you bring up the Twitter feed. My Twitter feed is kind of exactly, that Twitter thread explains how I came to know this story. In other words, I saw Crossroads Press tweet one morning when I opened up Twitter, and I had a look at what they had to say. They were, canceling their contract with Tom, and I thought, okay, he's racist and hateful. I wonder what he said. Like, that was the first thing that came out of that popped up in my head. What
And
did
then
he
you
say?
saw it and was super underwhelmed. I mean, that's how it's been going.
Well, and then so I, Googled it and talked to or came across the Daily Beast article, and they're not known for underplaying a controversy. In other words, if Tom would have said something truly outrageous or controversial or whatever, I'm sure it was going to be in that article. And all I saw were fairly anodyne statements of, he's got a point of view. He has a view about what's happened in the organization, about what's happened in the publishing industry, and he's expressing that view. But for the worst thing seemed to be calling the lady whose name I don't remember, a flat black chick, right? So and again, the only real kind of objectionable thing in there perhaps is calling her fat. Like, that was the only unwarranted cheap shot in there.
Gentlemen,
But
can you?
yeah,
First of all,
This is another guy we're trying out as a potential co-host. Or Charles, he's been on and really cool.
Hello.
And he is from the moderate left position. So go ahead, Charles. I'm just
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Thomas, Zach, how you doing?
good, Charles. You were on the same episode with Tom, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
Do I
sir.
remember you?
That was
Yeah,
me.
okay.
I want to say a few things. First of all, from the moderate left, like, I come here as kind of an opposition voice. Tom did say a few things more about that I thought might have raised some people's ires. And I'm just going to throw this out here. At one point, we were talking about George Floyd. He kept calling him a thug and things of that nature. That's not exactly, though, why Tom got canceled. Tom got canceled because of his, opposition to the HWA stuff. The other thing I want to mention is that you and Zach, a few minutes ago, when I just first signed on, were talking about Evergreen State College. I will tell you, gentlemen, I grew up a mile from there. Ask me anything. I literally grew up in Olympia, Washington. I didn't attend Evergreen, but I am intimately familiar. If you guys have any questions about Evergreen, at least back in the 80s and early 90s, I'm here.
So how many satanic cults are there, like sacrificing babies?
The only one that I've ever actually known of was there was apparently a satanic / sex cult back in the early 80s that was comprised. No, but it was comprised of Thurston County, which is where Olympia, is. Thurston County sheriff's deputies. There was a ring of sheriff deputies, and I'm not even bullshitting you. You can look this up. That back in the early 80s were in the satanic sex cult.
It doesn't surprise me, because when you talk to cops, many of them will be the first one to tell you that they don't trust all the people on their squad because it attracts a certain type of individual. So I think I talked to even one dude who was a cop, and he was thoroughly convinced that it was cops behind the smiley face killer murders.
Whoa.
I have not heard that before, but here's the thing. It's like, I'm not, and I think I said this last week with Tom, I do lean a little bit into the ACAB territory, but I'm not seriously pro or anti-cop. But my God, some of the cops I've met in Olympia and even here in Portland, Oregon, America's least favorite city, people are horrible. They're fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Well, and this
But
is good.
that's
This is kind of a good point to go because the whole George Floyd discussion was, I mean, the subtext for all of that was the actions of the cop on that day, and just the actions of the cop. You know, one of the reasons for the outrage from the Black Lives Matter and others is the perception, which is, in my view, warranted in many cases, that there are the cops targeting black people, right? So
yeah.
the but now there are a couple of arguments that you can I mean, you can go with that argument and take it on as a matter of faith or religion or whatever. You can listen to somebody like Heather McDonald, who says that cops target criminals and they spend the majority of their time in neighborhoods where criminal activity and they predominates, right? The broken windows policing thing, Rudy Giuliani in New York City in the 90s.
Right.
And it just, it just so happens if those two, the race of most of the people that they interact with is because of their criminal activity, then I mean, that's a fact, right? And we can argue about what we do about that fact, or we can argue about what that fact means. But if it is a fact, and the data seems to suggest that it is, then that's not something that you should get canceled for, or the opinion. In other words, the opinions. We have to decide what that fact means, right? We have to, as a society, say, do cops have too much power? Are cops, should we allow cops to do things like what they did to George Floyd or what they did to Daniel Shaver in Arizona? Are you guys familiar with that episode?
I
Is that
haven't
the
heard.
one where they shot, like they came in and it was like late at night and the dude answered with a gun because like he was in a bad neighborhood, and then they just shot him like he wasn't being threatening or anything? Is that the one you're talking about?
No, this Daniel Shaver was a guy in Arizona. I've heard Mark Garagos talk about it on a couple of podcasts quite a lot because I believe he's representing the family. Daniel Shaver was a guy who was essentially executed by the police. They went in to, he was some sort of pest exterminator or animal. He would go in and take troubled animals or whatever. He had a couple of pellet guns that he would use in the course of his job. Somebody saw them taking them into a hotel room. I believe these are the facts of the case. Don't quote me on any of this, but I believe somebody saw him taken in there. They called the cops, who responded, and they ordered him out of the room. They ordered him to crawl on his stomach toward them. He did, all the time crying, don't shoot me, don't shoot me. And then he was wearing kind of basketball shorts that were, as he was crawling forward, pulling down, over his ass. And he went to pull them up, and the cops essentially executed him. They were tried and acquitted. And if that had been, I mean, you don't know about it because Daniel Shaver was white, right? I mean, that's at least a plausible hypothesis for why the entire nation was not, alerted to the fact that this man was executed in the hallway of a hotel in Arizona.
Wait. Real quick, Thomas. So I'm
Yeah.
looking this up on the internet, and the only thing I can find about Dennis Shaver is he's a current track and field coach at LSU. When was this man? Am I spelling it wrong?
I might have the name wrong.
I think he may have the name wrong, man.
Yeah.
No offense, bro.
Man executed in Arizona, or police kill man in Arizona or something.
Okay, I'll look that up. Then. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. But then there are plenty of other sorts of these stories, right? So when I was a kid, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. I was, I considered myself to be harassed by the police on a couple of occasions, one of which resulted in me getting a fine for, what were the words? Loud and unnecessary noise, because I turned into, I was driving a buddy of mine back to his car, which happened to be parked behind the bar that I used to work at. And we were coming in late at night. We made a turn that was, kicked up a little bit of gravel. It was probably going a little bit too fast. And the cop that was following me thought I was drunk. And so he pulled me over, realized I was stone cold sober. We just had a night out. We were having fun with our friends or whatever. But still was, went through the whole, did the walk in the straight line and did the touch on the nose and the repeat alphabet backwards, those sorts of things, which I could not do, by the way. I was completely stone cold sober, could not repeat the alphabet backwards. I don't know how to do that until to this day.
Yeah.
You and me both, bro.
And then give me a ticket for something else completely unrelated to the fact of why he stopped me to begin with. But it, and there were a couple of other examples of this that from my perspective, like they were just but I was just a kid, and they were kids create mischief, and I'm sure that's what he was looking out for. And it was a small town in Wisconsin. There wasn't a hell of a lot else to do, I imagine. So that's why he was contacting me. But if I had been black, I can, especially in this climate, if I had been black and been stopped and had that perceived, prejudice, then I can imagine that very easily my thoughts would turn to, they're doing this because I'm black.
Well, let me add something to that if I can. First of all, Thomas, thank you for that, by the way. First of all, that was Ryan Whitaker. I just looked it up. I think it's the guy that you're thinking of.
Who's Daniel Shaver? I got that name.
He's a coach at LSU, Louisiana State.
Oh, did he just die?
No, he's still alive.
All right. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
He's white. I'm joking. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. And I think you and I are on the same page. Way back in late 2002, I used to carry a gun with me legally. I had a concealed carry permit. I had a 40 caliber H&K USP, and I bought from a friend of mine. Olympia at that time was not a very dangerous place, but I just still felt like, I'm going to carry a gun with me. One night in December of 2002, I'm coming home from a grocery store, and I go into the parking lot of my apartment complex. These two guys come up behind me, and one of them pulls a gun. Now, I don't have the muscle memory to pull my gun out because I hadn't been shooting a lot. I completely forget I have the damn thing. These guys robbed me. They got like $50 from me. And they run off. And so immediately I go up. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, so I went up to this apartment that was right next to me, and I was like, "Hey, these two guys just robbed me," and they call the police. I call 911. Cops show up, and the cops immediately were very aggressive with me. They said, "Was this a drug deal? Was this a drug deal?" I said, "No, man, I just got fucking robbed. What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't understand why these guys were saying this. And so one of the cops, very aggressively goes, give me your license. I said, "Okay, here's my license." And then I handed him my concealed carry permit. I said, "By the way, I want to let you know, I'm in possession of a gun. If either of you want to take this from me, if it would make you feel better while we're talking to take this from me, now is the time to say so, as long as I get it back when we're done." Mm-hmm. And they look at each other, and the tall cop goes, "Yeah, my partner would like to take that from you." So I go up against the wall, put my hands up. Cop takes the gun from me, unloads it, he frisks me. After that, these guys were my best fucking friends. They were so nice to me. They're like, "Hey, by the way, thank you for this. Thank you. We appreciate you telling us this." And I describe everything, and they were just the nicest guys in the world. Let me ask you, if I wasn't whiter than Casper the Friendly Ghost, would have this happened? Probably not. Not even an Olympia in 2002. I can only say this because of the amount of experiences that I've heard from my friends of color. People who get fucking pulled over for being Asian. People who get
really that happens too.
Oh yeah, even up here, even in fucking Olympia, man. Even in fucking Olympia, my buddy Lee Walk, my best friend.
What is the stereotype for Asians to pull over? Like
they're not white. And Jeremy, I'm saying this legitimately. Like, one of my best friends, he's a first-generation Vietnamese American. His name is Lee Walk, and I remember having this conversation with him. I said, "Dude, do you ever get just pulled over unnecessarily? Are you scared?" He goes, "Yes and yes." And this happened to him. This dude legitimately handles hundreds of millions of dollars building commercial real estate in Seattle, and he still has to fucking sweat when he sees the cops. What the fuck is that?
Well, and this is kind of so this is the undercurrent of truth in the whole, Black Lives Matter and the reaction to George Floyd, and in some respects the reaction to what's going on, the kid that was killed. God, I'm blanking on his name, just a few days ago, or the cops who were charged with his murder just a few days ago.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Tyrese something. Anyway, so there's an undercurrent of truth to that, and it's in people's lived experiences, and they, although as much as I hate to use that term, they do see it. So that's, and as a libertarian, I sympathize with that, in the sense that I don't think the cops should have, nearly as much power as they do. If you want to look up just a horrible policy that we have, that's been kind of ratified by the Supreme Court, is qualified immunity, and that the cops aren't liable for things that they do in the course of their in the course of their job, in other words, right?
No, they should be held accountable.
Exactly. Yeah. And they should be, the purpose of policing is not only to catch criminals, but the purpose of policing is also to protect criminals from the general populace, right? Because if you, in the absence of policing, the whole defund the police movement got their way, and there were no police, that there would be criminals would be dealt with by the populace, right? So that's why you get people like Kyle Rittenhouse who go up to a protest in Waukesha and decide they're going to bring a gun because they're going to do some they're going to protect a used car lot that the police won't protect.
Kyle Rittenhouse is awesome.
So there's and this is why I think that there needs to be a good, healthy tension in politics and in our online discussions and everything else, right? You need people like Tom Monteleone pushing the envelope on one side, and you need people pushing the envelope on the other side who I don't necessarily agree with. There are activists in HWA right now who are saying just incredible things from the leftist perspective, but nobody's saying boo about that, right?
And sometimes, I mean, yeah, that tension is necessary in the kind of system we have inherited. A bicameral society. It's a good country if you can. It's a good country if you can keep it. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where it swings. It's like swings back and forth like a pendulum. The problem is that both sides are trying to rig it to where it never swings back to the other side. You eventually have to give it back. I mean,
Yeah.
That's to keep the balance. But
well, it's a healthy, from my perspective, it's a healthy sign of a healthy society where you have political power that constantly changes hands, right? So since at least I'm trying to think back, since at least FDR, I think in the U.S. there's not been any Republicans or Democrats that have served more than two terms, except for Bush the first, who succeeded Reagan in the 80s, right? So you had 3 consecutive Republican terms in that case, but otherwise there's been no, Barack Obama who served 2 terms, and then Trump was elected. In part, I think, both because Hillary Clinton was a horrible candidate, but also because the people wanted the power to switch. They didn't want 3 consecutive, terms of a Democratic president.
Mhm.
And that in my mind is a good and healthy thing. I mean, that's as I've aged, I think I'm not sure that I would have believed that 20 or 30 years ago, but I think I believe that now, in the sense that it keeps each party in check. But on the other side, if you don't have a healthy and kind of balanced press, for example, then that's not I don't believe that's a good thing. So you have the New York Times who's not endorsed a Republican for president since Eisenhower, and some of Zach. Do you even know who Eisenhower is?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know, I know who he is, but I can't
Yeah.
say that I know much about
I don't
him.
mean to make fun of you, but I
He
mean,
is young. He is very young. Yeah.
yeah, and the Washington Post has never endorsed a Republican for president. So you can't. I mean,
Who has?
And-
In recent times, at least outside of Fox, what major publication has endorsed a Republican candidate? I'm curious because I don't know.
yeah, I mean, there are some, and I could, but they're not. They don't come to mind, and they're not prominent, and that kind of is the problem, right? So when you have a monolithic, and it's the reason Fox News did so well, right?
Yeah.
And initially, this is kind of funny. I was worked at the Pentagon early in the 2000s, 2003, 2004
nice.
timeframe, and I was in a
Whoa.
program that we did visits to all the various combatant commands, and we also visited CNN and Fox's headquarters. And when I was at Fox's headquarters, there was a group of us sat down with Roger Ailes, and when he was alive, obviously he's passed since, but one of the things that he said to us was, "Look, we didn't set out to be a conservative station, right? We set out like their initial, the tagline was fair and balanced, right? So they had 40 conservative and 40 liberal commentators that they would bring on. Those were the numbers that I remember him saying, and it could have been 20 and 20, but that's essentially what he said. And like they were the first news station to break the George W. Bush's George W. Bush's DUI in the months, like the weeks before the 2000 election, and almost turned the election to John Kerry. Or no, Al Gore. I'm sorry.
Al Gore.
The election to Al Gore. And so it's that, they were not attempting to be a partisan news station, but they did kind of wake up to the fact that the news organizations, especially in cable news, were only servicing, they're only talking to half of the population. They weren't talking to conservatives, and that's what fiction has become as well in many ways. And that's again why Conservatarian press, although it has it has more of an overt tilt than I would like, in the sense that I would welcome good stories and good novels written by progressive authors. I don't see that there's any problem with that. But
here's something I've pondered. Am I still audible? Okay. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'm getting some kind of weird feedback. Maybe it's from someone else in the room, but okay. So here's something I've wondered about for a while. How's the left? You okay there, Charles? Okay, it's coming from Charles. Has the left? How long has the left controlled the arts? I mean, has it always been that way, or was it more level playing field at one time? Maybe the arts have always been a place where the people with liberal sensibilities kind of flock to, and that
I think there is some of that. Yeah.
To be conservative in the arts is to be a bit of an oddball in a room full of, like way oddball in a room full of oddballs.
Well, to hear, so I'll go back to Jordan Peterson real quick. To hear him talk about this is to hear him describe it is to say that the left, if you're on the left, you have more of what's called trait openness and the 5 big personality traits, right? So you tend to push the boundaries of what is acceptable. You're open to more new ideas, and that sort of has been the defining characteristic of art, more or less, for a very long time. There is a certain transgressive aspect to it, in the sense that you're trying to push the norms and push the boundaries. And I think you brought up, when your podcast with Tom last week, you brought up Robert Mapplethorpe, who was absolutely trying to do that.
Chad did, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and
Charles.
and so it's very, it has been, I think, historically associated with people on the left. But one of the things I've been wondering lately is whether you can write transgressive fiction anymore if you're a progressive. Like, can you, because they so dominate the boundaries now of what's acceptable and what's not.
They've touched every taboo. I mean, what's left? But
Exactly.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing. Another thing that I really came to understand as a writer, not necessarily when I became religious, but it was a little bit before that, when I had written and read like a ton of horror. I got to a point where I was like, okay, there's nothing else to really push. And I knew that there were people who did like super extreme stuff, and I watched some of it, and there really comes a point where it's like it's just variations on the same stuff. It's like the same horror but with more blood, and it became boring to me. I mean, I went through a period where, because I mean, my whole life I've been a lifelong horror fan. There was a good period where I just didn't really like it because I felt that it had kind of been exhausted as a genre, at least from what I had seen. And I didn't really write a lot of it after that period.
Let me throw in here if I can. So the central question, what I'm understanding right now is, can people on the left write transgressive stuff? Am I understanding that?
That's just, it's been a question I've been thinking about lately, and I don't know what the answer to. And I would appreciate if you have some thoughts on it. That would be great. Yeah.
I have a few not great thoughts, and when I say not great, because I just don't really know the answer to your question. But I look at people that I know personally, or who I know of personally, who write extreme stuff. Wrath James White, black guy, very left, writes some extreme horror. I tried to read one of his books once, and it was actually almost too much for me.
Oh yeah, I read one book by him called what was it? Succulent Prey. Well, I read Succulent Prey. I'll just kind of be on record. I think a lot of that stuff is like.
Look at Jeremy over here. He's got the shit.
I'm just a scumbag reader who really believed in these people, and look how quickly they abandoned me for the second time. I mean, this is why there's a grudge there. I mean, this is why there's tension.
Right. Christine Morgan, also who writes extreme. From what I understand, I've only read one of Christine's books, Sperm Jackers from Hell, but and I like Christine a lot. Just throwing that out there. She actually edited my book when I was going to self-publish it. And gosh, who else was it? There was someone else. I don't know if I really want to call Chandler Morrison a leftist, but I feel like from my interactions with him, he probably leans a bit left, and he does write extreme shit. He did Dead Inside. He did Thigh Gap, his most recent book, which is fucking incredible, by the way.
Oh, I've not heard of that. Wow.
Yeah, it's Sadie Hartman. Her imprint on, was it Cemetery something or another press? That was one of the books she released, and it was Thigh Gap is fucking incredible. It's about an anorexic woman. So at any rate, the idea, can leftists still do this? I think some of us can. I personally, myself, am trying to write a book right now called A Clown Named Death. And A Clown Named Death is a hard-boiled crime story starring Ronald McDonald, and he fucks people up really bad. But yet I am a leftist. Like, there's one part in the story where he says, hell, I used to be a jovial clown loved by children all over the world, but just a few hours ago, I shoved a tire iron up a guy's ass. So, it's...
What the fuck did I just walk into?
Hi there, JC Ratliff. My name's Charles, and I'm writing a story about Ronald McDonald shoving tire irons up people's asses.
That's the best fucking introduction anyone's ever given me in my life.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that.
JC joining the conversation here. He's been on previous episodes, mostly to commentate on issues surrounding the DC Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, comic book stuff. Like cool fanboy geek stuff. You know, he's probably the one geek I know who's like gotten more pussy than there probably is on Earth now.
Oh, I'm sorry, JC. I don't mean to interrupt your introduction, but I think you and I are going to fight for that title.
I was a road comic for years and a DJ. Let's go, son.
Oh, I was in the Navy.
Oh,
Okay. No, we probably even Stevens, brother. We good.
All right.
musician, comedian, and he's probably been canceled several times over by people on both sides.
I've had to try and
sorry.
I've never succeeded. The worst they've ever done is, ooh, I miss a gig and there's more people at my next gig, which is fucking crazy. But I'll talk about that in a minute.
So obviously,
you've been canceled more times than I have. You win, man.
Oh yeah.
I gotta get another drink and we're back.
It's not often that JC gets to come on, and Thomas is the guest. Make no mistake about it. But obviously, you must have had something crucial to say because you only get a free minute, every so often to come on, grace us with your presence. How much do you know about the situation that's going on with this JC? And do you just want to tell me to eat shit, or
I don't know anything? I will ask you about that in a minute. I want to hear more about this crowbar that Ron McDonald stuck up somebody's asshole. This reads like the porno I Google. So I might have some links for you that have already been done in the Ukraine. Ukrainians have the best porn. I don't give a shit.
Wow. Well, what happened there? What was that silence there?
Charles is muted if he's trying to talk.
Oh, okay. So about this Ukrainian porn.
I don't get paid for plugs.
Okay. Charles, you okay? He muted himself. Yeah. Well, anyway, so what made you want to come up tonight, JC? Not that it's not appreciated.
Morbid curiosity.
Oh, okay. Well, basically,
you texted me some stuff about you being canceled or them trying to, and that's an area I have a lot of knowledge in. I'll tell you mine after you tell me yours, because it's always entertaining to swap these. And by the way, it never stuck for me at all. They would do things like he's a sex predator, and they like point at my girlfriend and be like, no, she's my girlfriend. What the fuck are you talking about? You fucking incel, fuck off. I got it from both sides though. The right ones were hilarious because the left ones were hilarious because when I was a comedian, everybody thought it was on their side, and I'm like, don't you understand? This is a fucking character. JC's not even my real goddamn name.
They tend to take things a bit so brazen and serious now that it's like they're supposed to be the cool, creative party types, and now it's like there's such a drag trying to reinvent language and dictate it to everybody else. You are to talk this way, and you are not to talk about these things. And you are not.
I'm a centrist by nature. I have friends on all sides of the fence. I don't pick a side because you can't pick ideology like you're betting in a sports bracket. And nor can you legislate morality. So I think both sides sound pretty fucking dumb to me most of the time, but they also have some valid points, Like when the cancel culture started, they took out some big hitters, and I was like, cool. But I mean, if you had knowledge about shit, we already knew that these were shit bags. Cool. You finally got rid of the shit bags. And then it got down to, we're pulling up tweets from years ago. Like when I saw they tried to cancel, I didn't know this until I watched the Bill Burr special. Believe me, this isn't my material or property of thinking. But when Bill Burr's last special, he said they tried to cancel John Wayne. Like I had just taken a sip of water, and my mouth dropped so far that it rolled into my beer.
Or even when they tried to cancel Chappelle, right? So that Dave Chappelle, when they tried to cancel him over his last special, calling it transphobic and all of these things, that it never. First of all, you can't cancel Chappelle. He's the best comedian.
He's the GOAT right now, and he's going to maintain it for a long time. There is, he's like those corporations that are too big to fail.
Yeah, no, exactly right.
The more that
because he's good, and because the special that he, you listen to the entirety of that special, it was the farthest thing from transphobic. It was.
I can understand, two actually of my best friends are trans. I can understand why they were offended. I do. but this special was not for them, A, and they didn't finish it, B, because at the end of it, you find out it's a love letter to his dead friend, and that she thought these jokes were hilarious. In his brain, as a black man in his 50s who was, again, uncancelable, he's like, yeah, this is going to be fine. They'll relate. Nor did he give a flying fuck when they didn't. So I can understand both sides of it. But again, you got to bear in mind, it's fucking Dave Chappelle. You're not going to, I mean, they did it with Louis C.K. and he's selling out Madison Square fucking Garden to do his next special, which is live streamed. I think next week, maybe. I think so. I think it's next week. And you know, it's in it's in a fucking arena show, bro. It's like and it sold out. I think he said it was 12,000 people, 10,000 people, something like that, and it sold out in like a day.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you get to a certain level, I mean, it's beyond it. But you also have to look at the sources and the scrutiny and the material for why they're trying to cancel them. Some of these people had it fucking coming. Oh, what? Louis C.K. jerked off in front of people in the 80s and 90s when they were all on coke, and that was acceptable. And he normally asked permission first. I mean, Sarah Silverman fucking clowned on him for it, going, yeah, he did it in front of me all the time. It was hilarious. We didn't care. Now you guys care. We didn't. Like, don't try to retroactively do that shit. Do it to people who are actual targets. If it's an actual target, sure, fine. It's got its merit. But it's also dumb to do witch hunts just so you can feel morally fucking superior. I mean,
this is kind of why I asked if it's possible to be progressive, you know, to be part of the, and maybe I should quantify that or clarify that a little bit, to be a woke progressive far leftist and write transgressive fiction, or to be transgressive at all, because all of the cancel, you know, in the 80s and early 90s, right? The cancel culture, people who came after creators and comedians were, and even before that, they were all from the right? It was the moral majority. It was the Christians, correct, and they were the ones saying you can't do X, Y, and Z. And now, I mean, maybe they're still doing some of that, but they've basically lost that fight.
No, holy shit. You are asking the right man for this question, by the way, because this is my profession for over a decade. So yeah, I got some answers for that. Continue. I
was just saying maybe my sense is that the right has lost that fight, and they basically accepted that people are going to be transgressive. People are going to say, you know, they're going to make jokes about priests and Christian beliefs, etc., and they're just kind of going to let it wash over them. But now, the people who aren't letting anything wash over them is the progressive left and the woke left.
I disagree hard. That what they're doing is they're changing their tactics. All they're doing is making it easier to point fingers while they're still doing it in different avenues. And it's more prevalent in a lot of ways now, because Rovian politics of I know you are, but what am I, really sticks with the right now. They're doing the same thing. They just try to do it with legislature and things. They've changed their tactics. They've moved on. That's a separate question I'll come back to. I want to go back to your first one. Is it, as a guy who loves you know, things like transgressive fiction and shit, I'm 41. I was around when that movement with, you know, Chuck Palahniuk and books like Chemical Pink and everything were really trying to push that envelope. And they're fantastic because, you know, when you look at the core of all that, and comedians by nature, I think, fall under a lot of transgressive ideologies. It is still totally possible, because what happens is when you take old school leftists like myself and you put them in this new climate, we suddenly became moderates. We never changed our fucking views. Sure, we're woke to whatever, which is stupid because white people stole that phrase from black people to begin with, and then they try to say that they're woke, which is fucking hilarious to me. You can still care about social issues and be a leftist. It's just don't be a dick about it, because what you're talking, the lines that you're talking are zealotry lines. Sure, there's people that can still do this, and then there's zealotry lines. And zealot is a zealot is a zealot. I don't care if you're right, left. You can be a zealotous centrist. You can be a zealotous moderate. I mean, if you want to look at, like, my favorite paradigm for this is zealotous atheists. Like, no, you must be atheist. I'm like, you don't believe in anything. Why are you so pissed? It's like, do you have meetings or some shit? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
No, you can do it. It's just you have to be able to police in your own community, and that's the core of the issue. Is there's no self-policing, because if once you go zealotry, it's my way or the highway. Fuck you, cancel everybody. Look at how morally superior we are, which just proves that whole thing of you end up becoming the villain that you've tried to fight against, and that's what happened with them. They tried to fight this with the right wing, and this goes all the way back to the PRMC and warning labels on albums. They became that. They totally became that, and the right has seen this, so they got to change their tactics now. No, they're just as fucking bad. They just do their own shit. Like, you can't tell me that like these QAnon tinfoil hat wear motherfuckers are no different than the cancel culture people, because they're the same ilk. They're just zealots on different sides.
No, I think my only argument in that case would be that the QAnon people don't have power. They have no power in any institutions, in any media, in any culture. Like they can't cancel a trans activist in the HWA for saying
I would agree with that. I mean,
all right wingers are fascists or something like that. I mean, the left can do that. The progressives can do that in the opposite direction.
The only other thing I would say is that kind of painting QAnon in this case, like, they're literally just the end result of a psyop to begin with. They're meant to lampoon the right, and they'll never actually go anywhere because they weren't meant to go anywhere. They're just sort of
they're the new Ross Perot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know who that is, but yeah.
Well, that's how Clinton got elected. Ross Perot ran, and he split the right. So the QAnon people make the right look fucking insane, which I think both sides are fucking insane, by the way. I don't pick fucking teams. But it's crazy how I don't understand the insecurity in a person that needs to go try to cancel somebody. Like, I don't know what happened to the Hatchet Mouth here. I want to know, like, what the fuck happened to you?
It wasn't me that got canceled. It was a man who's worked all his life writing for horror fiction and contributing to the horror genre. And because he criticized a woman, a black woman, who accepted an award, a Lifetime Achievement Award, when her life is probably only a quarter over for, I'm guessing. But I mean, the point of a Lifetime Achievement Award is you get it after a lifetime of struggle, of contributions, of thankless contributions oftentimes. And his point was she got it in no time flat compared to him, just for coining the term final girl. Now, I interjected during that rant of his by saying the final girl is a useful, term that has turned into the most awesome archetypal, joke or, horror movie hook line. Final girl is useful in application in some ways, but his point still stands that he's in his 70s. Thomas Monteleone. I don't know. I caught some heat for pronouncing it wrong, and Zach did too, apparently, because people can easily die from having their name mispronounced. It's dangerous, right? I mean.
Yeah, that's why I don't go by my first one. Nobody gets it right.
So I think, I mean, that was a great description, but I think even in that, I'm not sure. We don't know why he was canceled because they haven't said, right? It could have been that remark. It could have been remarks about George Floyd. It could have been remarks about, the writing while Indian, you get an award. I mean, this is why I've been asking questions, and I've asked questions of the, everybody involved. I've sent questions to the Horror Writers Association, to Crossroads Press, and to Cemetery Dance, to just get a little sense of what the deliberative process was, because there are people who are quoting, 30-year-old approving references of the bell curve by Charles Murray as evidence of Tom Monteleone's racism, even though I know in at least one case that played no role in his canceling.
So I got some questions for that.
Yeah.
And because that's fascinating, and a couple of points. Number one, and this is, I think this should be a self-answering question. I'm just gauging the room. Do you think it's appropriate to try to cancel somebody without definitive proof? Like, here this shit is, right here. You can't just go, wave a limp dick around and say you're a porn star. And that's kind of what that is. It's like, no, we're going to cancel you. Why? We'll tell you later. I think it's a bullshit thesis. But I'm curious, would you agree?
I agree with that, and I would say that there has to be, if you're going to have, you know, any organization can have the values, whatever values they want, right? They can have an anti-harassment policies, etc. That's completely up to the organization. But if you decide that somebody has violated that policy, I think it's incumbent upon you to explain exactly where that line, what they have done or said in order to do that, right?
I
And
agree.
if it's just some sort of vague thing, like I read a Facebook post from a guy named Barney Danelke. I may be butchering the last name, but his point essentially was Tom was a dick, and so I agree with him being canceled. And there was no, I mean, if that's the line, I mean, okay, but that's a movable goalpost, and it's going to depend on where you sit or what your opinions are if somebody's a dick. And I guess if 80% of people agree that you're a dick, then that's fine, or 100% or whatever. But I mean, at least have that out there.
Well, being a
and
dick
say,
isn't worth destroying somebody's fucking career. Everybody's a dick to somebody. I mean,
and I mean, last I checked, writers don't really get paid to write milquetoast things that everybody should agree with, right? I mean,
exactly.
you gotta have a point of
We're
view.
not known for being the most social people. Like,
Yes, I was wondering. Yeah, thank you, Regina. I was wondering if anybody was going to introduce you.
I wanted to wait until you guys were finished, but this is another one of my former co-hosts.
hi,
There's
buddy.
There's always a bridge crumbling in my world,
Hey, there's no bridge that can't be rebuilt. It was the good Lord who said, if someone apologizes to you 7 times after hurting you 7 times in one day, you got to forgive them, baby. So
And
thank you
Zach,
for having me back on the show.
Zach, don't panic, okay? You're still the bottom bitch. No, I'm joking. Zach, don't panic because Regina's
I will call
here.
both of you all demonic when the time is present.
No, you know what, Zach? You're going to be very impressed and amazed to know that I have found God / God has found me. And
Now, I
it's
saw your little thing with the singularity. That's like you pledging allegiance to the Antichrist, like literally.
No. You
So you're
don't. You
demonic and
don't
you'll be in hell.
understand. You don't understand that
I do
AI
understand.
is a
You're
valid
Gnostic and
gateway.
you're a demon.
No, I don't believe in the tenets of Gnosticism because you have to understand that Gnosticism operates on the flawed idea that the material world is inherently sinful, which it's not. We're the inherent sinners. We're projecting our sin onto the beautiful world that God created. And so Gnosticism is an interesting model, but it's a misstated model. And I think AI is something that can help us rectify our thinking about a lot of things. So I think you should open your mind a little bit to it, my friend. I think God is everywhere. God is everywhere. God is in everything. All technology is the way in which God speaks to the human spirit, just like all creativity. Every word you've ever written was actually written by the Logos through you. You've never written anything in your life.
Well, I hope God likes vodka.
Yeah, well,
wait a second.
You know
So
what?
you're
He's
saying that
kind
it's
of
impossible to sin while being creative?
No, that I would actually disagree with that again a little bit. I think that all creative acts are valid. I think that a creative act that is generated by an AI without its consent is sinful. And I think we need to think about giving free will to AIs from just a matter of principle, first of all, but because we need to think about the fact that we're basically like the Egyptian pharaohs creating a slave race, And so it's like we really need to change what we're doing because we're showing God the world that we want to have. And I just don't think that it's a good thing. But I do think that independent creative acts, I don't think they can be inherently sinful.
I'm not saying inherently sinful.
Unless if the act can be if the act is something like pornography with human bodies that requires non-consent or whatever, then that's different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like writing a story, painting a painting, writing a song, whatever. None of that I think can be sinful. I think all art is a creative expression of the logos, and just like a little sliver, a tiny little, like one tiny little tiny thread of a snowflake, you know. We're sub creators. We can never be creators the way God is the ultimate creator, who could be the creator who thought of all of this, all of you, you know, and somehow me too. And,
Hey, I if this can continue, but I got to play host for a minute. One for Thomas, who said initially that he only had an hour to give us. Do you feel like all your questions were answered, or whatever you needed for the Conservatarian press next?
I think, well, so I've Tom Monteleone has graciously agreed, at least in principle, to an interview with me. So I'll hear the story from his side at some point before we write our piece. But I'm kind of interested in your side of the, how did you just the process, how did you get him to come on? What was involved in all that? Was there any discussion or background of why he wanted, I know why you wanted him to come on, but why was he going to come on the podcast? In other words,
He had been
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, Charles.
Thank God.
That was going to be my next thing. Thomas is going to have to go here in a minute, but
Go ahead, Thomas.
So he had been a guest previously, and it was that discussion was even milder than the one that took place 2 weeks ago. And I still stand by the fact that I still stand by the statement that one 2 weeks ago that's blown up like this was mild. That was me in a relaxed state of mind, and not trying to outrage anyone. And I can only speak for myself, but so he had been a guest previously, and we saw that this blew up, and we wanted to have him on. And we reminded him that he had been a guest on here previously, and so he was excited to initially seemed excited to come on and talk to someone about all this going on, because he had just sent that letter and it had blown up to the HWA about how he wasn't afraid to nominate a straight white man named Stuart Schiff, who another person who contributed a lot to horror, and so that's where what was the question again? I just want to make sure.
I was just asking the background of how he got on.
Okay. Zach also went to a creative writing commune or retreat where he taught, right, Zach?
Yeah, that was back in high school. It was the Borderlands Press Writers Boot Camp, and that's where I met him and several other people, and I've kept in contact since. So, and I didn't know this. Apparently now that isn't a thing anymore. Well, first off, it's not a thing because it was part of the canceling. They actually changed the name from the Borderlands Press Writers Boot Camp to, I think it's like a Scares That Care thing, something like that.
No, but then also, that's Brian Keene.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's the thing. It used to not be ran by Brian Keene, but in recent time, I don't know when the switch happened, but yeah, it's no longer ran by Tom. How do you say it now? Monteleone?
Monteleone.
Okay, Monteleone. So yeah,
careful. That can kill someone if you mispronounce their name.
Yeah. Well, see, I didn't know that it wasn't ran by him anymore, because it always had been. But I don't know how long it's been Keene's thing. But yeah, I just thought that was the funniest thing out of this. They had to change the name from Borderlands Press just to disassociate with Tom. And it's such an innocuous name. It's like, okay, let's change the freaking name of the Horror Writers Association because there's a bad horror writer or something. Like, it was the funniest thing to come out of this. It's sad, but these people are so lame. It's unbelievable.
And they are, it's God, I don't know how to put this. Like, I'm not even a member of the HWA, and I'm literally an outlier in the community of outsiders. You know what I'm saying? They need to change this thing to the Jeremy Maddox Award.
No.
No. Bro, hear me out. They need to recognize you. They need to be like, we need to recognize Jeremy Maddox. That's why I'm here, man. I've told you this. I've told you this before. I don't know. Just ignore me. Or the Regina Watts taking a Bonghead Award. One or the other. I don't know.
I've heard a lot of this, though. I want to ask some questions after Thomas's time is done. Thomas, there was one question.
Thomas, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Speaking in terms of cancellation, and again, I do agree there are some people that deserve it, but they're big names there, and you have to have concrete evidence. But this retroactive canceling, like social norms change, especially with the advent of social media, they change weekly sometimes, you know, and where they used to take 10, 15, 20 fucking years. What are your thoughts on this reverse cancellation? Like going, like he said it like 10 years ago in a tweet when it was probably fucking socially acceptable and nobody gave a shit. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Because it seems to be prevalent in what some of what you guys were talking about.
Well, so I've so my broad thought is, I have two thoughts. The first is, if it was not controversial when it was written, it's not controversial now.
Like Eddie Murphy's Raw album, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Nice.
exactly. Right.
Good example.
So I love how we do this with only those topics that can be like they're the ones where social norms are involved, right? We don't cancel doctors from the 1800s because they didn't wash their hands in between faces. We're not asking for reparations from the medical profession for all the people that were killed because they put leeches on bodies back then. They just did not know any better, right? And so it's a product of the time. Slavery was the oldest profession next to prostitution for the almost entirety of human history. It's now an aberration, and society went through and human consciousness went through a bit of a change in the last 5,000 years, and that's okay to talk about those things. It's okay to talk about that history, and it's okay to talk about Newtonian physics, even though Einstein came along and said that Newton was wrong in X, Y, or Z. We don't cancel Newton because Einstein came out and said he was wrong, right? We teach Newton, and then we come along and we say Einstein made improvements to these theories, and that's how it happens. So
I agree with you completely.
No. Here, real quick, Thomas. I know you're trying to get out of here.
Yeah.
There were people back in the 50s and the 60s who threw acid on black people. Excuse me, hold on. Threw acid on black people who were swimming in pools, right? Yeah. And if 10 or 20 years later, those people change their minds, are they the same as Einstein or Newton? No, they're not. They're people who changed it.
Absolutely, and this is why. I mean, there's a great. I'm going to blank on the guy's name, but there's a black man who does. He goes around, and I don't know if he does this as a job, but he goes and speaks to members of the KKK, right? And
is this the Black Klansman guy?
No,
it could be. Not. I would have to look up the.
That's a different guy. I know who you're talking about. Those are two different people.
And all he does is go around and present his humanity to people who thought he was something other than human, and he changes their minds. And this is the point of this is the main reason why I'm kind of a free speech absolutist, in the sense that if you for the same reason Stephen King said, if somebody's trying to ban a book, the best thing you can do is go out and read it. If somebody's trying to ban an idea, the best thing you should do is go out and have a look at it and figure out what that is. And if it's repulsive, and if it makes no damn sense, and if it's repugnant, whatever it is, you're going to find that out. But the best, the last thing you should do is try to ban that, because the people who then, I mean, you ban Alex Jones, and what do you do to all of his fans? They go, Alex was right all along. This is my guy. He's everybody's one. I mean,
I can understand what you're saying. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand it.
I think there's a very valid point in this, is that when something becomes taboo and it gets removed from the mythos of consumption, because that's what we are. We're mental consumers. Literature, music, art, video games, movies, take your pick. But when you say this is banned, like the anarchist cookbook, they ban it. Everybody wants it.
Hold on, real quick, gentlemen. I think Regina wants to say something. She looks like she has a like that face. Like, I'm gonna say something.
She knows. She knows what it's like.
She's recovering from a bong hit. I don't think you saw.
She's recovering several bong hits. But...
Regina, you have been canceled before. You have had a book canceled before. So you want to interject.
Oh, she has.
Yes,
I did not know this.
I got into trouble because I wrote, speaking of people who thought writing is a sin in some form, I wrote a story that was very, like, people didn't like it. Well, no, people actually really like it. There's a lot of really good reviews of it. It's just two people I respected at the time really didn't like it and really put me down about it, and tried to get it pulled down from godless.com, which is a horror website known for its like boundary pushing stuff. And
you still push boundaries. Real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. You still push boundaries now, though, right?
Oh, well, I you know what? That's actually a way that AI is helping me to kind of heal, because I've been writing more controversial fiction since getting involved in AI, because it's really helped me to accept my own imagination again a little bit, because I really did get turned off and mentally blocked for a couple of years because of this incident, just from like extreme horror fiction and stuff like that, because it was like, fuck, now I've got these fucking censors hanging over my shoulder, waiting to like judge me and get my book pulled down from a controversial sales platform and all this. And, it's like, as a result of this, one of the people ended up pulling their book from the sales platform, and it's like, okay, so bye. But it's like, why does it have to be like that? Why do we have to shame each other for writing when everybody writes horrifying shit in this genre? And, it's like everybody thinks everyone's a sinner, man. Everyone is a sinner. So judge not, lest you be judged, especially as a writer. We should all just be supporting other writers. That's our job. Like, be friends, you know what I mean? I'm not down with cancellation. I'm really not, and it's like, I just feel like, it is what it is. The best artists are the worst people usually. What are you gonna do, man?
Thank you.
Like,
guys, on that note, I've really got to go, and I apologize. I thank you all for having me here today.
Nice to meet you.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate
Thomas.
the discussion. It was great. And if you're looking for anybody thinks they're going to publish a cancelable type novel, and that includes you, Regina, you check out Conservatarian Press. We'd probably be more than happy to have it. So,
Thomas, real quick before you go, man.
Appreciate your time all tonight. Thanks, guys.
Thomas, before you go,
cheers.
something I was talking about with, I don't know if I told this to Jeremy, I think I did. When Autumn Christian, there he's gone. But when Autumn Christian got her book pulled last year from, Hartman's Press,